Well, I got myself into a heck of a good one this time. There's a guy at work that has I think it's a 1985 Ford F-150 diesel pickup truck that he's trying to get going. I guess it was an old farm truck a guy had, and everything's cobbled up to the point where he was laughing and told me it even had knob and tube wiring in it. I guess the guy at some point rewired his old farmhouse and needed to wire something in his F-250 pickup and use the old knob and tube to rewire it, which that's kind of amazing. But anyways, the turn signal mechanism is screwed up. I guess these are unavailable now, this particular unit, and what we have going on here is this one contact right here is intermittent. So it feeds from here underneath here across to there somehow. So I have to somehow get this thing apart, and you notice it's, I don't know if you can see or not, it's riveted together. That's what these little rivets are right here. I gotta somehow drill those rivets out or get them out some way without destroying it, and see what feeds across there, and see if I can't find some way to fix that up with a little dab of solder or something. Of course, in amongst all this as well, you got the hazard flasher mechanism that's pretty much right in that same area. So I don't know. I'll try and do something with it, but I guess he did track down another steering column at a junkyard, but they want like $1,000 for it, so that's not going to happen. So I'll come back if I make any progress. Well, I got the switch plate apart. That was kind of interesting. These little rivet things here, I couldn't just drill them out like I wanted to because they wanted to spin in the hole. So I ended up having to use my little, my smallest die grinder I got on a flexible shaft. Of course, I didn't have any pointed carbide burrs. All I had was this bullet-nosed one. So it's kind of hard to get through that without cutting through some of the plastic, but I did. But here's the underside of that, and right here is the offending contact, the one that was not making. But basically, he had turn signal on one side, but not on the other. So the one side was making just as it should. Well, that power is transferred, believe it or not, by the hazard flasher thing. You see all those little spring contacts on there. Well, it just so happens the one that transfers the power over to that post, if you look at that from the side, it's this one right here. I'll notice how much flatter that one is compared to the other ones. The other ones are sprung up quite a bit, and that particular one is down flat, so that's why that was making intermittent contact. So I'm going to try and bend this thing up some to where there's enough spring tension on it that it makes all the time. There. Now I'll try and get that together and see if that'll work. Now the problem I'm going to have is getting this thing back together. I really have nothing that's going to replace these little rivets, so I'm probably going to have to go to the local home center and see what the heck they have. I don't have anything this small. I really can't use bolts because anything that sticks above the surface on this side is going to be a problem because this contact block scrapes back and forth. That's how you make and break the contacts when you turn your lever for your turn signal one way or the other. So I can't have any bolt heads sticking up like here, back in here. If I do, it's probably going to hit. So I guess I'm going to have to measure the diameter of these rivets, but you might as well do that right now. Let's get a quick dimension with a set of dial calipers. About 90 thousandths. So I'm gonna have to see if I can't maybe find either a roll pin or a drive rivet, which if you've ever seen a drive rivet or not before, basically it looks similar to this, only it's going to have like a spiral cut on the shank, and when you basically, it's just like you said, you drive it in with a hammer and it spirals its way down into the plastic or the metal, and then that holds it in. I'll have to see what somebody around here doesn't have one or the other of those. And then I think what I also will do, I'll clean this up really well. Once I get that in there, I'll clean this contact up some too. I notice it's kind of dirty. Maybe even spread that up slightly. But clamp this together in my little electronics vise, and the whole way around the seam there. Maybe use a little bit of epoxy or something to help keep that together. One problem that I am going to have, this right here is for the horn. Well, that has to be, the drive rivets that held that plate on also held this particular piece here on. So now you got something with spring tension. So I'm definitely going to have to probably epoxy that with something really good and strong, plus the drive rivets or roll pins or whatever. But one way or the other, I'll devise some sort of method to hold this thing together, and once I do, I guess I'll be back. Well, I'm starting to put this thing back together. I have some 3/32 roll pins that I put in the holes. Now the problem is, it looks like they must have drilled one half of this as a clearance hole, and the other half is like an interference hole. So this drive pin goes in pretty tightly on the one side, but then loosely on the other. So what I'm doing at the moment anyways is I'm gluing this seam the whole way around, and what I'm using is super glue and baking soda. If you ever tried this, never tried this trick, try it out sometime. It really works good at gluing plastic, way better than standard super glue does. You got to use the runny super glue though. If you use the gel super glue, it won't work. The reaction that happens just doesn't happen quick enough. But I'm going to go around this whole seam with that super glue, and then I'm probably going to look around. I already searched all around this area, can't find what I want. I'm going to look on maybe like the McMaster Car or MSC website and see if I can't find any Tinnerman's nuts, and then I'll put a Tinnerman's nut right on the end of each one of those roll pins up tight, and that'll keep that pretty snug. Notice on the other side I have all those roll pins below the surface because you got stuff here sliding back and forth. You can't have anything sticking up. That's why you can't use a bolt across there either, unless I happen to find maybe like a 440 countersunk head bolt, and some of these holes there just isn't enough material to do that. So I've got this clamped. I could probably unclamp it, it'd be alright, but that's a good place to hold it. And I'm going to start gluing into this seam here, and then work my way the whole way around that seam. And then, let's see here, around there. And then one other thing I gotta do, I got the little thing here for the horn switch that has to slide in through there, and then it gets riveted or something as well. And I'm going to have to think of something a little bit better for that, because that has spring tension on it that's going to be moving around. Notice the wires broke off in that one. When I pulled this out, it fell right out. But I don't know if the horn circuit worked or not, but at least with it you can splice into the wire and put a little button on the steering wheel or something, but couldn't do that with the turn signals. So we're moving right along on this. Hopefully by the time I'm done with it, it'll actually be functional. Right now it is, so well, I'll be back for more updates later. Well, we're pretty much coming to the conclusion of this. I got it all back together except for the steering wheel, and now it's time to test it as it's bolted into the unit. I've got my little wire list here. I know that the light blue wire is the power in. I've got a little pin punch here for the stock for the turn signal. I didn't even give that to me. So there, we're on one. I believe this is for the left turn signal. So there's the blue, and according to my chart, green, white should be left front. You can hear that. That has continuity. And also green, orange should be left rear. We have continuity there also. So the left side is definitely correct, and the left side I know for a fact is the side that was the problem originally. So back to neutral, and now to the right side. Let's go to white, blue. Good there. And orange, blue. Yep. So we now have continuity on all four turn signal lights, front and back, left and right. So this thing is more or less completed. What I decided to do was, instead of trying to find some sort of rivet or whatever, I left those roll pins in there, and I was able to kind of get a little bit of like a real thin chisel in between the seam and kind of spread that out just slightly, and that made a little bit tighter fit when I drove it down in there. And then I decided to glue not only the seam the whole way around that like I showed you earlier, but also I epoxied each end of the drive pin, the roll pin, so the unit's actually held together much better than it was from the factory. It flexed quite a bit on those little rivets that I had to grind out of there. So I think it's going to be good to go. The only thing I do have to do is I don't think this here is going to fit underneath the steering wheel. That originally had one of those flat Tinnerman's nuts on there, and I couldn't track one of those down. All I could find was this little axle nut. I have another one of these. I'm going to see if I can't get the center out of that without destroying it. Pop this one off of there, slide that one down in there, and then basically what that axle nut has in the center of it is like essentially a Tinnerman's nut. So I don't think once I bolt the steering wheel on, I don't think I'm going to have the clearance for this. I think it's going to hit that. So that'll be the next step, and then I'll give it back to the guy Monday and tell him to plug the wires in, make sure everything works, and hopefully that'll be the end of this project. Well, I've got the steering wheel back on this thing. Everything seems to be working fine, so I'm going to give it back to him Monday, and hopefully it works good. That little plastic cap was easy to get off of there. It just popped, the little center just popped right out. Everything fits good, so hopefully it'll work for him.